ticklish business any way you look at it. Come on, we'll stick together.
Welcome back to Hollywood, the most glamorous place in the world. Because nothing says glamour quite like a store where everything costs $5. I've been thinking this week about our first festival. How many of you were here in 2010? Why I need to cover the lights to hear something. On opening night in 2010, Robert Osborne welcomed you into this theater for a restoration of George Cukor's A Star is Born with Judy Garland and James Mason. I was across the street, poolside, at the Hollywood Roosevelt for a screening of Neptune's Daughter from 1949. Now, I got to bring out two of its stars, not only Betty Garrett, but Esther Williams. To say I was nervous would be a disservice to crippling anxiety. What saved me, of course, was you people, your applause. Not for me, mind you, I got some lovely, respectful clapping, don't get me wrong. The applause was for Betty and Esther. And that moment, when I heard that thunderous reception, was a clear sign for me of what this festival is, and what this festival means, this shared feeling that we all have, all of us in this room. From us at TCM, to you, to our guests, and then back around. The sense of community that we share is only intensified over these past 14 years, where I think remarkably, every piece of authentic Hollywood memorabilia in that store is still just $5. How do they do it? One last quick 2010 memory. I made my first festival joke that night. I was promptly one-upped by Esther Williams, then 87. When Betty Garrett, 89, apologized for having a raspy voice caused by a cold, I told her that, no, it sounds sexy. She said something like, oh, don't be silly, and then Esther cut in to tell her, hey, when a man tells you you're sexy, believe him. So I think it'd be nice if we took this moment to thank, first of all, you for that night, and to thank our late great friends, Betty Garrett and Esther Williams. This 14th festival is unique because, as Paula mentioned, we are celebrating the 100th birthday of, I believe, the defining studio of classic Hollywood. Yeah. MGM had the glitz, but Warner Brothers had the grit, and I will take grit over glitz every single day. The history of Warner Brothers is the history of Turner Classic Movies. Where would the network be without our most aired film, Casablanca, also screening Sunday in this very theater? Where would we be without A Star is Born? Or A Star is Born? Or A Star is Born? Or, they're all good, all four of them are good. Warner's is the studio that marked the start of talkies and the end of Rico. It's a nice line, right? Come on, thank you. I'm not just saying these things because our CEO is backstage either. I am saying them because he is backstage with Steven Spielberg. This is merely the start of a special weekend here. We'll be paying tribute to many special guests, including actor Russ Tamblyn, production designer Patrizia von Brandenstein, film historian and writer Donald Bogle, who will become the fourth recipient of the Robert Osborne Award. Where is Donald? Donald Bogle, everybody. Plus so much more, but it begins tonight. Any list of great westerns must include our opening night picture, a classic directed by Howard Hawks, Rio Bravo. And we will be seeing a world premiere restoration made in partnership with Martin Scorsese's The Film Foundation. With that little important detail in mind, before we get to the film, I would like to welcome to the stage a few guests. Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav, and two of the finest directors to ever make motion pictures in any era, both board members of the Film Foundation, ladies and gentlemen, Steven Spielberg and Paul Thomas Anderson. Thank you, fellas. So, David, you know, you're running this company. There's a lot of channels. And it's a huge company and a lot of demand for resources. Yet, you clearly made a decision that a significant amount of those resources were going to go to TCM and the Film Foundation to preserve movies that are 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. Why did you make that decision?
Well, first, thank you so much for coming. I'm a fan just like you. If I wasn't here, I would be sitting with you. I watch Turner Classic movies all the time, as Ben knows. It's the history of our country. First, the motion pictures, there's nothing like it. We come together. There's no other medium where you come together. Most of the things we do alone. But you go to the theater with a friend, there are people around you, the lights go out, and it's magic. It happened to me when I was very young in Brooklyn, and I would go on the weekends with my dad, and it's that idea of a story, and it could change the way you see yourself, the way you see the world, and it's critically important, I think, particularly at this time, that we tell stories. It's now the 100th anniversary of Warner Brothers. It's surreal, and I'm so lucky to be sitting on top of this great historic company. But in the 30s, the Warner Brothers themselves did over 100 movies a year. So there was only radio, and people went to the theater, and if you lived on a farm in Oklahoma, that's what New York looks like. And that's how you dress when you go out on a date. And for people in New York, that's what it's like to be on a farm. And movies taught people the stories of America, the stories of the world, and in many ways how to be an American. And so we have a great obligation. These are two of the greatest filmmakers of our generation, of my generation. So I'm so thrilled to be here. And we're all in on the motion picture business. We want to tell a lot of stories that hopefully you all will go see and bring them to Main Street in America. We need it.
So this partnership with TCM, with Warner Brothers Discovery and the Film Foundation, this is then Warner Brothers gets together with our head of programming, Charlie Tavish, and we work out which 10 movies. How does that, Stephen and Paul, how does that process go? I mean, this is the list of films that I guess you want to enter into this process is a lot bigger than 10. How do you pick them?
Well, we have a board. You know, in 1990, Martin Scorsese put this entire film foundation together. He had discovered that half of the silent films ever made had the nitrate that it was printed on, the actual printing stock that is run through projectors and shown in theaters, had completely decayed and fallen apart. And so he launched a huge rescue operation. And he enlisted a lot of filmmakers of the time, Sidney Pollack, Stanley Kubrick. There were a lot of Francis Ford Coppola, myself, there were George Lucas. We all sort of joined him to go around to all the studios to get them to try to finance this rescue operation to save our cultural heritage. And we've been doing that. We've restored since 1990 about 997 films. Early on, the decision was made to restore films that we thought united a director, collected the body of work of that filmmaker, so nothing would be lost. And then we started to make decisions based on the the quality of the negative, what was still survivable. And then, we have a board and we all kind of make the decision. Ann-Margret Brody of the Film Foundation, who manages everything, keeps me aware of titles that, she would like to see restored. David and Warner Brothers have their own archivalist, and they have titles they'd like from the Warner Brothers archive to be preserved. And every studio does have that. But we try to find the films, not the films that are our favorite movies, but films that tell a very unique story of this country and the people of this country, and not only this country, but we're rescuing experimental films, documentaries, we're rescuing international films now. We've already rescued 97 international films. So this is something that's not going to stop, and I have to just say I'm so proud that Marty, we were all very busy making our movies in 1990, and Marty put everything aside and said, no, we're prioritizing this. This is what needs to be done.
Paul. I suspect there's people in this audience who are like Paul Thomas Anderson. There is a television in Paul's home that the sound is down, but it is on TCM all the time, like you. You have understood right from as soon as you started making movies in your 20s that the history of this business mattered and was worth preserving.
Well, sometimes it goes even beyond the history of the business. It ends up, I don't want to get philosophical, but it starts to end up being the protection of memories, like very, very important memories that we each individually have. Where was I when I saw E.T.? I remember it very well, and I remember the friends I was with, and I remember who I took to see that film, as much as I remember the film. So they're memories of our life. It's the preservation of our work, but it's also preserving our memories, helping us to preserve those memories so that when you want to revisit that moment or that feeling of when you walk into a theater, you can. We all want to hold on to our memories, but sometimes they fade away from us, and we can hold on to them if we preserve them this way.
That was moving. Thank you. By the way, Stephen mentioned Ann-Margret Brody. She's here from the Film Foundation, Executive Director. Margaret, thank you very much. And another board member is here as well, a filmmaker of some significant note. The great Alexander Payne is here somewhere. By the way, last night I interviewed Laura Dern and Diane Ladd, and apparently Alexander and Laura talked Diane into doing a little bit part in Alexander's film Citizen Ruth, and Diane's message was that I'll do it, but he owes me, and she wanted me to tell you, Alexander, that you still owe her. And she plans to cash it in. I don't know what that means. But, by the way, Alexander and George Stevens are going to be here at the festival doing Penny Serenade, George Stevens Jr. That's going to be great, too. And George Stevens Jr. is here tonight. So, what's this was 10 Warner Brothers films we picked, among them Rio Bravo, East of Eden. The process has got to be incredibly challenging, right? I mean, in a short answer to laymen out here, Paul and Stephen, how does it happen? What happens? How does it begin? And by the way, are there arguments when you go about, do you ever leave that meeting pissed? I can't believe Spielberg wants to restore Rio Bravo.
No, it's okay. I pretty much rubber stamp whatever Marty wants.
We let Marty do the talking, and we all nod, and we just agree with him. And I will say, there was a first on our last board meeting. There was a historic moment, when Marty said, he mentioned the title, and he said, I've actually never seen it. and everybody just gasped because there's nothing he hasn't seen. I don't remember what the title was, but we all kind of...
Ben-Hur?
We follow Marty. You know, I can remember a moment. You know what can happen, what has happened in the past. I just remember one instance. You know, there's a great Max Ophuls movie called Caught. Robert Ryan, Barbara Bel Geddes, and we all know it and love it. But you know, I can remember many years ago realizing that it was hard to find on DVD. It was hard to get, and I brought it up, and that became something that we pursued. It can kind of happen like that. I mean, we're working on a top copy because Chris Nolan brought that up, the sort of condition that was in. And we follow Marty, but every once in a while I think we all chime in with something and just say, there's something that's been nagging at me, and mention it to Margaret, and that's more like
I've had, I was not able to find even a good VHS cassette copy of the only film Marlon Brando ever directed, One-Eyed Jacks, and there was which is an incredible film, one of my favorite westerns. I was never able to see a good copy, even on television. It looked like it was in desperate need of repair, and so we set about to restore that, and that was a really hard restoration. But what's really important is that there's a very healthy negative. There's somewhere a good inner negative, or there's some inner positives. But we're still talking about chemistry. These are chemical elements, and we can draw all of our digital work from the actual, chemistry of the medium of celluloid. And so you need that. What we don't do is we don't take a DVD of a movie and then restore the DVD. We need the virgin elements of the film. That's why certain films it's very, very hard to restore. But luckily, that had a really good negative. That was a very healthy negative.
When I think of what we need to do, what our obligation is to move forward in the spirit of Warner Brothers, I think of three films. Black Legion, which was filmed in the 30s, which took a lot of courage at the time, but it was a movie that stood up against the KKK. Warner Brothers was actually sued for showing the Ku Klux Klan's insignia, and they won the case. And Confessions of a Nazi Spy, which was against certain. There was guidelines for what content, for how content, subject matter of content, and we were actually taking input in the 30s from some of the European governments. And the Warner Brothers, Cass Warner is here. Her grandfather Harry was at the studio at the time, but that was the first movie that talked about what was going on in Germany. And after the war, Gentleman's Agreement, and I mentioned Gentleman's Agreement with Gregory Peck, because I think I told Stephen when I saw it, because it was right at the time when there was a big incident with Kanye West, and we were questioning this whole moment we're in America with hate of other. And Turner Classic Movies put on Gentleman's Agreement, and I think you were in front of it talking about the subject was a reporter went undercover as someone who was Jewish, and the relevance. We tell stories to entertain, but a lot of what you do and what the history of film does is it's a way for us to heal, and it's a way for us to say what's okay and what's not okay.
Well, David, it does matter to all of us that we have somebody in front of this company who cares about these movies. Thank you for that very much. And Paul Thomas Anderson and Steven Spielberg, thank you for all you guys have done and the new movies you create and your keen eye always on the past. So thanks, David, Paul, Steven. Thanks, everybody. And you guys stay right where you are, because up next, the woman many of us have been waiting all our lives for. She is the star of Rio Bravo. Ladies and gentlemen, Angie Dickinson. And I'm going to need
You got a chair for this old boy?
How are you?
Love this man. You might as well know it right up front.
Well, I have never enjoyed conversations more than I enjoy talking to you. Because I was describing it out there on the red carpet, and they were like, "Why do you like Angie so much?" Which is like the dumbest question anybody's ever asked. And I was like, "Look, she's authentic, she's honest, and she's a little dangerous, right? There's always this little element of danger, mischief."
You don't know.
I got some idea now. This was this Rio Bravo picture, Howard Hawks. This was a seminal moment for you, right? This was a turning point in your career?
Oh, without question. I would be working at See's Candy, I'm sure, if I hadn't been picked up by Howard Hawks.
Were you working at See's Candy before?
No, I just go there a lot.
How did it come to pass? How did he...
See's Candy?
Yeah, See's Candy. What's your favorite See's Candy? I like the molasses chip.
Oh, it's too small.
See, that was a little dangerous, wasn't it? Like a little. I don't even really know why, but it was.
It's so good to have you back. Oh my goodness, you've been so busy. Yeah, he's wonderful.
So, you were a working actress, you'd been in some movies, you'd done a couple of guest TV appearances. How did, this big-time director, this was a big, important film for Hawks. He'd taken a couple of years off. This is the picture he wanted to come back with John Wayne. How did he find you? How did this come to pass that you got cast in Rio Bravo?
I'm trying to think if I was under contract for... No, I went to Warner Brothers under contract. He sold it. And that's where I went afterwards. I guess I was just on that list of, let's test a few people. And I was one of them. And I had to do a screen test. I'm thinking of a football player, and I can't remember his name. Of course, this will be one of many things I can't remember tonight.
A football player, I was about to say.
At USC, but he was a very, very popular football player. So he played the part of John Wayne. And I did the test, and I got it. And I don't know who else did. I doubt if anybody did. But Howard was a very deliberate man. He spoke like this, and he worked like this. And he kept at me, "Now you're pretty good, but you can be better." And then he just kept helping me, and I finally did the screen test, and got the part.
And was he,
for the great movie.
Was he encouraging as a director then, once you were in Tucson and you're shooting the movie? Was he supportive then, or was he critical?
He was a man of few words. Once he just said, just relax, guys, and told the crew to just relax. And he and I just talked there, and sat there and talked about nothing. It was just to relax me and get me to the point that he wanted me to be for the scene.
By
the way.
Yes, ma'am.
By the hour, you don't want to pay for what that talk took. Because the whole crew just sat there. I have one picture of the guy on the camera going.
So, John Wayne, Dean Martin, Walter Brennan, Ricky Nelson, this was a boys' men's movie, right? Howard Hawks. Were you accepted by your fellow actors?
By whom?
By your fellow actors. Were the Duke and Dean Martin, Ricky Nelson, were they all good to you?
Yeah, they were. You don't hang around on a set. I don't. Anyway, sure they were by not being against me, they were for me.
All right. Didn't you? They played cards a lot, right? Didn't they?
Yeah, Dean and who's that? John Wayne.
He's a big, tall guy.
Yeah. They played chess. We shot the opening. You know, on most movies you shoot the exteriors first because you've got to go with the weather, and it's very unpredictable. And Dean and
John Wayne.
John Duke. He was never called John.
Did you call him Duke right away?
Duke?
You called him Duke?
Oh, nothing else ever.
All right.
Yeah, nobody. You wouldn't dare.
All right.
And they played chess all the time. You know, when there's a lot of lighting going on, and you just have to either read a book or, you know, it's really tough to wait and wait and wait, and that's what we did.
So were you ever included in these games? Were you ever realize chess is a two-person game? I'm not an idiot, but did you ever play chess with?
Oh no.
I thought you guys played poker. Did you ever play poker with them?
What?
Did you ever play poker with John Wayne?
No,
with them? No.
No.
You play now though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think you want to join us.
I badly want to join you. Yeah.
You'd be wonderful.
So, but you have a number of scenes with you and John Wayne. Was he he's John Wayne by 1959. He is a big deal, and you were. Was he good to you? Kind? Was he a good? What was this experience like?
He was very patient, and Howard is a man that could just stand there for 10 minutes and not say anything, and you just wait for whatever was going to come next. Duke would always just go off and play cards with Dean, or chess. I think they might have played chess. And that was at least on location. What's your question?
No, you got it. I just was curious how John Wayne was. So this is what I wanted. So I was reading today that I think it was Variety that said your performance here as Feathers in Rio Bravo was reminiscent of Lauren Bacall in To Have and Have Not.
Whoa.
That's pretty good, right? Yeah. So, and then I also read, which I did not know, and I never brought this up, that Howard Hawks' first choice for John Wayne's drunk partner, Dean Martin's role, and he's wonderful in it, was an actor named Frank Sinatra. And I was curious whether you ever met him.
Thank God I did. That was a honey bunch to hold. He was wonderful, and yes, I think he was the love of my life.
Frank was. Well, that's very nice. I didn't expect that. That's nice. Do you think about him these days at all?
Yeah, I have Google, not the Google, what's the thing? Siri?
Sure, Siri, yeah.
I've got Siri, and I got my Frank all day long.
Oh, you play it. Oh, come on. That's the sweetest damn thing I've heard. That's fantastic. I could talk to you, Angie, forever, but we've gone way over, and I need to start the movie. But I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank you for always being honest and for delivering these performances in the movies and on television that matter so much to me and matter so much to these people.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Angie Dickinson.
The House 4 crowd is not like any other at this festival. Every film here is a 35mm print, so we're really excited that you're here. I do have a few announcements, so while I'm making these, please go ahead and silence your cell phone or whatever device you have. And also, and you guys are like the best police of this, but no screens on during the presentation. We have a screen. This is the screen we need. I want to thank City, the official card of the festival, for their 10 years of support. We could not do this festival without them. And if you have not been up to the Legion Theater at Post 43, it's a remarkable venue, and we do have shuttles again departing from behind Madame Tussauds on a loop. So I do encourage you guys to check out shows up there. It's now my pleasure to introduce our special guest for this morning's presentation. He's been on Broadway, he's been at Carnegie Hall, he's been in some of our favorite movies and TV shows, and most importantly, he's here this morning. Please welcome actor, comedian, and a good friend at TCM, Mario Cantone.
Well, hello! It's 9:30 in the friggin' morning. What are you all doing here? Aren't you hungover? I had one cocktail because I knew I had to get up and be with you all, and I didn't want to speak to you through a haze of tequila. Tequila residue, actually. The old Maid. I watched this again. I watched this again about a week ago, and I thought I hadn't seen it, and then I was like, oh, this crazy-ass picture. That's right. I remember this. It came out in 1939, which Bette Davis had 4 movies that came out that year. Juarez and The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex and a few others. Dark Victory. Dark Victory. And, come quickly, they want to operate on my head. Look at the clowns are coming in. Funny, is that the most hyper death scene in the world? I don't know how she died after all that energy. I have no idea. And look, the clowns are coming in. Funny, I can still feel the sun in my hands. Go now, Anne. Be my best friend. And when I die, have champagne. And be gay. Be very, very gay. And then she dies. How? That's why I love that movie, but it never moved me. I'm like, she can't die. No one dies that way. She throws the dog down the steps. She had enough energy to throw the dog down the steps. Let me die alone. Go now. But this movie is so friggin' nuts because I'll tell you what it is. Everyone knows that Miriam Hopkins, who plays her sister Delia, which is actually the name of Victor Bono's mother in Baby Jane, so that gives you a hint how friggin' crazy she was in real life. Miriam Hopkins, you see the mental illness in her eyes through her performance. She's out of her friggin' mind, this woman. And if you spoke to Davis, she was like, first of all, well, she didn't like Bette Davis because she thought she was having an affair with her husband. What was his name? Anton Ludwig or something like that. Yeah, that's who it was, right? And they hated each other. They just didn't like. And she said, Bette Davis said, she tried to steal all the scenes we had together. She really did, and I would not allow it. And if you also look, Bette Davis ages in this movie. Miriam Hopkins would not friggin' age. She wouldn't age. I mean, Bette Davis looks like the ghost of Christmas future at the end, and Miriam Hopkins looks like, a Barbie doll. It is very weird. And you just see that crazy fire in Miriam Hopkins' eyes. It's this needy, crazy. I think that was her way of trying to steal every scene. And if only, Bette Davis talked about a lot of people that she disliked. She pulled no punch. She did not like Faye Dunaway. She was like, Faye Dunaway was totally and utterly impossible. Yes, she was. What movie did they do together? Amy Semple McPherson, where I played her mother. She played Amy Semple McPherson. And there we were in a hot church one day, thousands of extras sitting there with their boxed lunches, waiting for Miss Dunaway. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 goddamn hours. Oh yes, I had to entertain the troops. I sang I've written a letter to Daddy. Finally, Miss Dunaway shows up after 3.5 hours. And I said, did you get your eyeliner on correctly at this point, Miss Dunaway? That's a great story, but the story she could have told about Miriam Hopkins, and how crazy she was. Ernst Lubitsch had this movie first, and he was going to do it with Judith Anderson, who did it on Broadway. It was a Pulitzer Prize-winning play. And believe me, it's entertaining. It's great. And Bette Davis, she's never bad. She's magnificent in this, and she does the job the way it's supposed to be done. I love that she had no vanity. She claimed that Crawford had a lot of vanity, although I'm the biggest Joan Crawford fan. So we would have probably had an argument about that. Sure, she wouldn't know, but I love Miss Crawford. She was totally horrible. In Baby Jane, she wore a different set of breasts every day. It was like running into the goddamn Hollywood Hills. She said that. All right, I could spend all day with you because you're like the great. Why are the 9:30 a.m. crowds the best? Well, I don't want to go, but I have to. Because they have other movies they have to show on the screen later. I could go on singing. I could. Thank you for welcoming me. And I love this. I love being part of TCM so much you have no idea. Like, I was like Eve Harrington. I had to get in there. Make them love me. It was my, I always said if I, handled my career the way I handled becoming part of TCM, I would be a superstar. But instead, I chose this because this is so important to me. These films that they preserve, that they show, and all the hosts are amazing. And, I love my Ben Mankiewicz. And today I'm cheating on him with Eddie Muller because we're doing East of Eden at 11:45, which will be awesome. Ooh, you said that like an Italian woman at a wedding. Ooh. Anyway, okay, well, from 1939, The Old Maid, starring Bette Davis, Miriam Hopkins, totally impossible, and George Brent, and directed by Edmund Goulding, and screenplay by some guy named Robinson, I believe. Anyway, I can't retain. Forget it. It's 9:30. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. The Old Maid.
That means a lot. I appreciate it. Great to be back, huh? Big screen. Carole Lombard, Clark Gable. Loved them separately, loved them together. And here for the first and only time. And I'm grateful to see them on the big screen. Now, that handsome brute is how MGM's Frances Marion described Gable the very first time she saw him on Broadway in 1928. She went to bat for him with production chief Irving Thalberg, as did Lionel Barrymore. But Thalberg took a look at him and said, I don't know, he's got big bad ears, I don't like him. But he screen tested him for a film in the South Seas, and having an hibiscus around his ear did not help. Anyway, Thalberg did notice this growing chorus of women who were raving about him, so he relented and gave the actor a 1-year, $650 a week contract. Gable appeared in a dozen films that first year, playing all kinds of characters, opposite the likes of Jean Harlow, Greta Garbo, Norma Shear, Joan Crawford. Gable proved his star power, and Thalberg got more than his money's worth. The one person who had trouble believing his good luck was Gable himself. When Ralph Bellamy arrived at MGM in that rush of stage actors who had proven their readiness for talkies, he met Clark early on as they both were in the Secret Six. Bellamy had been signed the very day after he replaced Walter Houston on Broadway. That poor stage, they just one-way tickets, I'm telling you. Gable warned Bellamy, this can't last. I'm not buying anything I can't put on the train back to New York. I'm telling you, this just can't last. But of course, it did last. Gable took his acting seriously while keeping a self-deprecating sense of humor. Anita Luce loved telling the story of finding him at a studio drinking fountain with his dentures in his hand. Oh, no. Look, he said as he flashed a toothless smile, it's the king of Hollywood. Carole Lombard was 23 when she made No Man of Her Own, and she was still finding her path. Born Jane Alice Peters in Indiana, like so many other girls, she came to Hollywood as a young teen with her mother when her parents separated. Over 5 years, she jumped between Fox and Senate and Pathé and back to Fox again before signing with Paramount in 1930. That same year, she married William Powell, and while they were only husband and wife for a little over 2 years, they stayed great friends for the rest of her life. It was he who suggested her to co-star with him in My Man Godfrey several years later. The director, Greg LaCava, adored her, and she thrived under his light-handed direction. She cared about her work and her friends and had a mouth that would make a sailor blush. I love this woman. I should also throw in that I ended up meeting Martha Laura, who was Frances Marion's secretary for like 20 years, but only after my book came out, and which was a killer. But before she and I became close friends, she passed at 104, God love her, and we had 15 years together of friendship. She lived out in Banning. Well, before she worked for Frances, she had worked for William Powell for about 3 years. And when he was married, part of the time when he was married to Carole. And she just raved about both of them. She said Carole would treat crew members, studio bosses, exactly the same. And what you saw was what you got, that she was just a doll to be around. I always really appreciated Martha's take on that. Because, you know, secretaries, man, they know a lot. You know? Now, a story I found repeated several times about this movie was that we have William Randolph Hearst to thank for bringing Clark and Carole together on the screen. Marion Davies wanted Bing Crosby as her co-star in Going Hollywood, and the singer, the story goes, was under exclusive contract with Paramount. Hearst talked Mayer into swapping Crosby for Gable. It was a nice, tight story, and I was excited to include it. But then I took a deep dive with my friend Laura Gabriel, who I think is here today, who did the book on Marion Davies. And we learned that Crosby didn't sign with Paramount until more than a year after this movie was made. Well, obviously, we decided to stop repeating that story, and thanks to Ellen Ellenberger, who wrote the book on Miriam Hopkins, I learned she was supposed to play the Lombard part, but nitpicked the script and didn't think the role was complex enough for her, so she walked, clearing the way for Carole. Hardly a day goes by I am not grateful for my extended family of historians. It takes a village. And those were the days. This treatment was purchased on August 6, 1932, and the film was released 4.5 months later. I mean, they churned them out. It was written by two old pros, Eddie Goulding and Benjamin Glazer, and directed by Wesley Ruggles, the younger brother of actor Charlie Ruggles. But this is no instance of a family member sneaking in the back door. Wesley was an accomplished director of over 80 films, starting with Silence in the Teens and going on to direct such various genres as Cimarron and I'm No Angel. No Man of Her Own is not an over-the-top pre-code like Red-Headed Woman or Jewel Robber. In fact, parts of it are just downright sweet. However, the code was starting to hang over the studio's heads, and the title was changed from No Bed of Her Own to No Man of Her Own, to give Joe Breen one less thing to complain about. Now, Breen was already at the Hayes office, but yet to have the real enforcement power he would wage for over 20 years, between 1934 and 1954. The film has a few overt moments. Carole walking around in her underwear, Gable eyeing her on the ladder, sitting on her bunk on the train, or him in the shower. That's a good one. I kept flashing on little but important pre- and post-code differences in the scenes here, and, for instance, it happened one night. The two stars sparkle on screen and are a joy to watch Yet their affair did not start until 3 years after this film was made, and Paramount reissued No Man of Our Own with a few tweaks from Breen to take advantage of the promotion of them as a couple. We know they had precious few years together. They were married in 1939. Carol was killed in 1942 in an airplane crash alongside her mother as they returned from a war bond rally in Indiana. Gable was devastated. She joined the Army Air Force soon after and stayed in the service for 3 long years. Theirs was a real love story and a real tragedy, and so we are so lucky to have this glorious record of the two of them together. And God love Kay Spreckles, Clark's widow, who buried him next to Carol at Forest Lawn when he died in 1960. Please enjoy Carol and Clark and their young, glorious selves in No Man of Their Own.
Hi, everybody.
I'll tell you what, it's been a fun day for me because I, earlier this afternoon, interviewed Rebecca De Mornay for the 40th anniversary of Risky Business. And then Candy Clark and Richard Dreyfuss for the 50th anniversary of American Graffiti. And now you for the 60th anniversary of Beach Party. Does that sound right that it was 6 years ago, or does that amaze you?
I thought it was about 90 years to me. Anybody hear me out there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Tell me, have you seen this movie lately?
No. I didn't think you'd recognize me without my bathing suit on. Very nice. No, you know what? We made that film 60 years ago. From time to time, Dave, we surf the channels, and Beach Party would be there. And it's always good to see, because to me, it still holds up, except for one thing.
What?
The dancing. The dancing is a little bit different, a lot different. But as far as the story and everything, it's always fun to watch. They're fun things to do.
Well, you mentioned the dancing, but I mean, I definitely take note of the number Don't Stop Now. The dance moves are great. When you think back to that, did that come naturally? Did you have to work hard at that and work with this choreographer, or were you just allowed to do your thing?
No, I think I just did my thing then, But you know what? We made those films, believe it or not, 15 days. Wow. Imagine that. Films in the last 20 years or so, they're on location, they're here, there, and they're there for months and months at a time, a year maybe sometimes. We made those films in 15 days. That's amazing. We would shoot, I don't know how many scenes we'd do, 30 setups, 40 setups in a day. You say, I would say to Bill Asher, who was the director, Bill, maybe Frankie should say this. He said, come on, just go have some fun. Come on, let's do it. Come on. Next setup. And that's how we made those films. Wow. We were really a group of friends. Everybody from all the pictures that we made, 7 to 10, like you said, everybody was in the same picture. We were all doing the same thing. So it was fun. It was really fun.
So when you say 15 days of shooting, how did that incorporate you being able to learn the songs? There's always new songs, to record them. I mean, how far in advance did you do that?
No, you learned on the set.
Come on.
I swear. We would go in, say I would be doing a scene with Annette, and then we were out of a scene for a while. So we'd go to the next sound stage, and they would have a piano player there, and we'd start to learn this song here, and then a choreographer there. So then we go back in, and then we would go back and do that scene, and we practice, It was that kind of a thing. It was like a stage show, really.
Did you ever feel like, it's just too much to do in 2 weeks' time, or were you young and enthusiastic and gung-ho?
Well, at 23, it was fun. We just had, I'm telling you, friends, it was an absolute ball, and it came off on the street.
Sure.
And people just loved it. We never thought that it would have the success and longevity. All these years, the success of these pictures, when we first did it, I think the numbers, if you talk about numbers, pictures now gross $300 million, $500 million, $1 billion. But in those days, 60 years ago, our films were made for $350,000. And we were grossing, those films were grossing somewhere between $15 and $18 million. Now, you take a picture today, you want to go see a movie you, how much does it cost, Dave? You probably know better than I do.
For an average movie, I mean, it depends on the type of movie, but I mean, at least, if anything, it's a studio film, at least 30, sometimes 100, sometimes 200.
No, I'm talking about for a ticket. Someone who wants to buy a ticket to go and see a picture.
I think it's like $13 now.
$13, $15, I don't know what it is. But our films were 75 cents, $1.
And you still post all that.
Yeah. So they were very successful.
Wow. Do you remember first meeting Annette Funicello?
Yeah, I do.
Together.
As a matter of fact, it was not on the beach. It was close by where we are right here in Hollywood. It was at the Hollywood Bowl.
All right, so I was a whippersnapper when this one was made. I was 19 or 20 years old when we shot Muppets Take Manhattan. And it was actually the first Muppet movie that I actually did work on the whole film. I took a break from college, and I was working. I'm just going to say what I was doing. I'm going to talk about the movie because I didn't make the movie. I worked on the movie. I worked in the mechanical puppetry department under Foz Fazakis, who was the genius who created all the sort of radio-controlled puppets. Any string puppet rigs, specialty items, and what we would call special puppet rigs. So that means what I worked on with that group on this movie was almost exclusively the rats. So all of the rats who were cooking in the kitchen, if you see rats running across the floor, that would be, I did a rig which I think it's a 3-second shot where rats run out of the Sardi's restaurant, and it took me like 3 months to build the rig that could do that. But that's what I was doing. So I was a young kid. It was really fun for me and exciting, and it was exciting for us to be able to do a Muppet movie in New York. Most Muppets were not shot in New York other than Sesame Street. So this film, this is Frank Oz's, this is his Muppet movie. He's a very careful filmmaker, and I have the honor of remastering all the Muppet movies as they come up, and they need to be remastered. I don't know, you may be showing an original film print, but it means I do know all the Muppet movies really well. And Frank Oz's work is so extraordinarily careful. I worded that incorrectly. He's a very precise filmmaker. Every scene transition is so carefully thought out, and it's quite interesting because this is the first Muppet movie was Jim Frawley directing. It was really like a co-directing with my dad. He obviously was the Muppet guy, and he was really telling Jim all the time what he wanted to do. So it was really Jim and Jim directing the first Muppet movie, and then my dad directed the second Muppet movie in his style. And the Great Muppet Caper is a very loose style. It's kind of, let's see what happens. Things can go wrong, and if they go wrong, that's fun. We'll put it in the movie. So his movies are a little crazier, and a little more chaotic. And then Frank comes in, does the third Muppet movie, and the precision is really extraordinary. But because Frank is so precise, it meant my dad had not much to do. So he was a little frustrated. It was like Frank was all over the script, Frank was all over the shooting, and he had it all worked out. So my dad really put most of his attention to 2 sequences in the movie that he directed as a second unit director. And he did the Muppet Babies sequence. And then, of course, that spun onto the show that is still going on today, Muppet Babies. And he also concentrated on the rats cooking in the kitchen sequence, which is extraordinary. And so that was what my dad did. But if you had told me then, when I was 19, that I would be directing the next Muppet movie, I would have absolutely said you're insane. I didn't even consider myself on a directing track when I was 19. But Christmas Carol was the next theatrical Muppet movie made. My dad and Frank made Muppet 3D, Muppet Vision 3D, which is in between. But Yeah, so that's about it. It's really extraordinary. Frank really showed what an extraordinary director he is when he made this movie, and it's seeing this movie that can tell you why he's a director who would be capable of making Little Shop of Horrors, which is easily the most complicated movie I've ever worked on. So this is really Frank's movie, and welcome and enjoy it. And here it is.
Was they met in an agent's office. When they were doing the rounds, what you would do during the 50s, and this particular agent, Jerry was with another person who he wanted to make his comedy partner, but they didn't have the chemistry. And then Ann walked in, and she was this beautiful, tall, red-headed woman, and he immediately fell in love with her and ditched the other woman. And he went in, Ann went in first to the agent's office, and she came out crying. This is what Jerry says. And he said, "What's wrong? What happened?" And she said, "Well, he chased me around the room. I didn't know what I was doing. He chased me around the room." And so he got a little upset. He went in, and he said, "What are you doing, chasing that young woman around the room?" And he said, "Well, now it's your turn. I'm going to chase you around the room." So this is the story that Jerry tells. I don't know if it's true. And then he left and asked her out for coffee. And they went out to coffee at Langley's cafeteria. If anyone's in New York or you know that cafeteria. And he said that she stole the silverware while they were having their first date because she needed silverware for her apartment in the village. That was their first date.
I love that story. And Richard, take us back to a balmy summer evening in 1977. How did you meet George Cukor?
I knew at that time in 1977, I was a writer, photographer, magazine editor, and I had done a story on Jamie Herlihy, who wrote Midnight Cowboy. And Jamie called me up and said he liked the interview and would I mind coming to dinner? So a few days later he called me and he said, "Would you mind picking up one of my guests who doesn't drive any longer?" And I said, "No, not at all. He lives over near you and his name is George Cukor." And I'm thinking to myself, George Cukor? I thought he was dead. And so I drive over to Cordell Drive, go up to his house, and I'm thinking, there was a little phone, you push the button, the door buzzed, I opened it, I thought I was going into the house, and instead I was just going into the garden. And up at the top of the stairs was George, and his first words to me were, "How about a drink?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know whether we have time. We've got to get to Silver Lake." And he said, "Well, yes, you're right." So I get him down, and at that time I had a gold 64 Eldorado convertible. It was a beautiful summer night with the top down. And I looked at him and I thought, let's get him in the car and put that top up. He's not going to. So I start the engine, and here's the whir of the motor, and he says, "No, no, no, I love an open car." So I thought, okay, so we drive down to the strip, turn left, and there, in this beautiful glow, I'm thinking to myself, I better not have an accident with this Academy Award winner in the front seat. And suddenly, I'm holding the wheel, and suddenly this finger and hand dart across, marvelous, marvelous. And I'm thinking, what is it? And I look over at the, not the Whiskey A Go-Go, I guess it was, and there was a whole line of the most beautiful blonde surfers lined up to get in there. And I'm looking at the surfers, and I'm looking at this, as he would say, elderly gent, and I'm going back and forth, and I'm just thinking, this is the oldest gay man I've ever met.
And how did it come to be that he, asked you to be his travel companion and part-time assistant?
Well, George was 78 when I met him. I was 27. And he needed, I worked for Air France, I knew a little of the travel industry and so on, and he needed someone who could be a lieutenant and sort of give him this sort of smooth passage from A to B. And he was getting a lot of invitations at that time of his life to go to London and Asia even. And so he just needed someone who could smoothed the way for him, and I was that person. You could never have dropped George off at LAX and expect him to get on a plane to London alone. It just wasn't going to happen. In fact, we got thrown off a few planes.
We'll have to come back to that.
Really.
That story. But Steve, you were not just a fan of Groucho Marx, but you said upstairs a fanatic, and he was sort of very elusive to you because he was a figure around LA, but you didn't get to meet him for a little while.
I was sure I would never get to meet him. I was certain of it because he was already in his 80s and in ill health. And I had been a Groucho fanatic, really an obsessive fan before it was fashionable. But I didn't want to marry him or murder him. I just wanted to shake his hand and thank him for duck soup. And I would get all of these reports from people saying, oh, I was walking along a park, Santa Monica near Rodeo, and there was Groucho in his little beret, and I would think, should I camp out there? Bring a sleeping bag? And then a friend of mine and I went to a pizzeria in Beverly Hills called Jacopo's, and they had a Groucho special on the menu, and I thought, well, you can go to Nate and Al's Delicatessen and they have an Eddie Cantor, but he's been dead for years. So I said to the waitress, does Groucho Marx really come in here? And she said, oh yes, he was in, let me see, yesterday. And he always comes in right after we open, and he always tries to pay with a $100 bill, and he knows I can't make change. He's so funny. And I wanted to strangle her, and I wanted to say, why is Groucho wasted on this waitress? Number one fan. There was, and still is, a motion picture called Animal Crackers that hadn't been seen in decades. And it had been made at Paramount in 1930, and then when MCA Universal bought the old Paramount films in the late 50s, it was included in that package. However, basically because of a clerical error, the rights to the film, the copyright had expired and reverted to the authors and composers of the original play, George Kaufman, Maury Riskind, hold your applause till the end, Bert Kalmer and Harry Ruby. And Universal didn't think there was any point in spending good money to bring out a 1930 Marx Brothers movie because they had, you know, Airport 75. And all my friends and I wanted to see this movie, and I came up with the idea. I was a history student at UCLA, of starting up a petition drive and to put pressure on Universal to show them that there were people that wanted to see this old movie that hadn't been in theaters in decades, hadn't been shown on television. And I was able to get in touch with Erin Fleming, who was the young actress who had started as Groucho's secretary but became his manager and really in charge of his life towards the end. And so she and I would have phone calls talking about the Animal Crackers campaign. And one time I said, how's Groucho? And she said, here. And I hear, hello? And I said, hi Groucho, how are you doing? And he said, how am I doing what? I said, how are you doing whatever you're doing? And he said, I'm telephoning. What are you doing? And I said, I'm telephoning too. It certainly is a small world. And then he said, all right, I'll let you speak it with my secretary, Miss Fleming. And, you know, my heart was pounding, but I had gotten to talk to Groucho, so I'm getting closer. And there was a day when she brought Groucho to UCLA. We had a table on Bruin Walk. There were all these petition tables for gay rights and ending the war and legalizing marijuana and the Hare Krishnas, and then this table of people trying to get an old Marx Brothers movie. Groucho came to UCLA, and I said, Groucho, I am very happy to be meeting you after all this time. And he said, well, you should be. and Aaron said, "This is Steve Stolier. He's the one who's trying to get Animal Crackers re-released." And Groucho said, "Well, did you get it?" And I said, "No, but we're working on it." And he said, "Well, you better or I'll fire you." And I said, "I didn't realize I was working for you. How much are you paying me?" And he said, "A little less than nothing." And we were off and running, and my heart was pounding out of my chest. There was such a crush of students hanging on his every word, because he had a sort of whispery voice toward the end. I remember some kid yelling out, "I can't hear you." And Groucho said, "You're very fortunate." And one of the reporters said, "Mr. Marx, what is the purpose of your meeting, of your appearance here today?" "I expect to get lunch." And she said, "No, but I mean beyond that, I may get dinner." So we talked, and it's like there we were gabbing away, and I'm like pinching myself. This is happening, and they're talking, "What do you think of what the young people are doing?" And they're being fans of the Marx Brothers after all these years. And Groucho said, "Well, I'm going to be flattered by it." He said, "Last Halloween, there were 3 kids that came to my door dressed as Harpo and Chico and Groucho." And I said, "What did you give them?" And he said, "I sent for the police." So Universal didn't like being embarrassed by this kid and his friends, and they relented and cleared the rights to bring the movie out. And they would bring it out at the UA Westwood and have a premiere in New York also, and that was it, and they didn't want to hear about it. And it ended up breaking the house record at the UA Westwood that had been set by the press. Excuse me. Never buy your teeth in the mail. By French Connection several years earlier. And it was, beyond gratifying to be able to see there on the marquee, the 4 Marx Brothers and Animal Crackers, and a long line of guys in tennis shoes and t-shirts and blue jeans, showing Universal that people did care about old movies back then. And I had a few summer jobs fall through that year, 74, for which I remain eternally grateful. And I thought, well, I have nothing left to lose, and I really don't want to lose this connection. So I called Aaron Fleming and I said, "Is there anything at all that you think I might be able to do?" She said, "Well, actually, we need someone to handle Groucho's fan mail, which has gotten quite big because of all the interest in the Marx Brothers. And we need someone who really knows their Marx Brothers to handle and organize all of his memorabilia that's going to be donated to the Smithsonian." And I'm thinking, please, And in my mind's eye, it's like a Tex Avery cartoon where she's still on the phone talking to me and I'm on the front door knocking. And I thought, I have died and gone to heaven, because it was at his house, and I was there for the last 3 years of his life.
They had a lovemaking scene that they actually made love. They were actually having, your daughter's here, they were actually having sex. There was a child here to make me feel guilty. But they were actually having sex, and they supposedly cut the scene.
So just real quick, when we were last night watching, what were we watching last night? The movie that I introduced yesterday that had the train? See, Penny Serenade. So we're watching Penny Serenade, and there's a moment where the train pulls out, and Irene Dunn doesn't get off the train. She stays in the cabin with Cary Grant, and I've updated my daughter that they have a baby. And as soon as the train pulls away and the screen goes to black, my daughter says, "Well, I guess I know how they got the baby." She knows.
She knows. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, it's unclear. So you'll see it. You'll get it when you watch this movie. And by the way, so Elizabeth Taylor won the Oscar for this, right?
Yeah. This was her 4th consecutive nomination. Raintree County, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
Yes.
Suddenly Last Summer.
Oh yeah.
And this one. There we go. 4 in a row. Yeah.
written and directed by your great uncle.
That's right. Also, the other Mankiewicz. That's what we call Joe. The other Mankiewicz.
Yeah. Well, I love Suddenly Last Summer, and supposedly she got this Oscar because she didn't get it for Suddenly Last Summer. But I don't think that's.
And she'd been ill, and it had been 4 in a row, and she feels like it was a sympathy vote.
Probably. Well, at least she knows. At least she feels that way. At least she's honest about it, because she hated this movie. By the way,
That's
hated it. Even after she won the Oscar, she was like, "It stinks. I hated it. Butterfield ain't. Are there any messages?" You didn't know I did Liz Taylor, huh? I got plenty up my sleeves. It's actually Borders on Chilly Winters. But
so this is why I picked it.
You did. This is why.
This is why.
But it was entertaining. I did love it. So thank you for this gift of Butterfield 8.
I got a couple of objections to this movie.
Okay, go.
First of all, Lawrence Harvey, it's a fight every time I say Lawrence Harvey not to say Raymond Massey. It's been that way for 20 years at TCM. Basically the same age, black hair, names have the same cadence. Raymond Massey, Lawrence Harvey. It's in my head. I know that they're not the same. There's nothing about them that's the same, but it's hard for me every time.
They're not the same age. Raymond Massey's way older than Lawrence Harvey, don't you think?
I don't think way.
Well, I'm way older than you, but
You're way older than just about everybody in this room.
But I look fantastic!
I also confuse Dana Andrews and Joel McCrea. So much so that I went up to Wyatt McCrea and said that I really thought that his father's performance in the Oxbow incident was that was a little embarrassing. It was, but I knew it came out of my mouth. Right? I was like, I've done it again. I've done my Joel McCrea, Dana Andrews mistake.
Well, no one told you to go up to him.
So, anyway, my objection is that we get Lawrence Harvey, and he's an objectionable character in this movie. I mean, why she is in love with this guy, that bothered my wife, but she just said this. Was like, why this guy? She could have it. She looks like Elizabeth Taylor, right? And so she's with Lawrence Harvey, right? Yes, Lawrence is with Lawrence Harvey. Right?
Not Raymond Massey.
And then we learn at the end when his wife, Dina Merrill.
I love Dina Merrill, by the way.
When she starts calling him Wes. How is his name Wes?
His name is Wes?
Wes. That is not what his name is.
Well, that's one of the many reasons why this movie's just completely nuts. That's right. It's just
Anybody here named Wes? Anybody?
Your name is Wes?
My name's not Wes. Nobody is really hot for a guy named Wes.
Well, by the way, I'll tell you something. Lawrence Harvey, is conventionally good looking. He's a handsome dude, but there's no heat. Do you know what I'm saying?
There's no heat.
There's no you don't go, wow, that's a guy. I don't know why she's in love with him.
No, it doesn't make that part doesn't make sense. It's a major flaw in the movie. I mean, he's a heel and doesn't have the thing that might make a woman ignore the fact that a guy's a heel. By the way, a guy who had that quality was going to play the Eddie Fisher part, but Liz insisted on Eddie. David Jansen was one of my favorite actors.
I love David Jansen.
David Jansen was making that guy had heat.
He did have heat. I agree. Here's my question: were they married at this point, or is this where the affair started? They were married at this point.
Yeah.
So the affair started before.
Yeah, because she went right after this movie. She went to make a
Cleopatra, and that was
7.5 years, and then
the other
Mankiewicz, and then she met that other guy. And then the other thing you object to, which is a great little thing in movies, is she's calling the exchange. She calls Butterfield 8, right? She says, "Hey, it's Gloria. Listen, if Mr. What's his name in the movie? What's Wes's last name?
Liggett.
Liggett. She goes, if Mr. Liggett calls, I want to take that call. Reach me wherever I am."
I know. How the hell are we gonna? There's no cell phone.
Wherever she is.
Wherever she is, and you find me wherever I am. I mean, I don't know where you're gonna be, Liz.
Would anybody know where you're gonna be?
Do you have a beeper? It's 4 beepers too. I mean, how? You have you have an antenna up your ass? I mean, where? How? Yeah, it makes no sense.
And then there's an inside joke in the movie. Next to the bank of elevators in the building, there's a directory for the building there, and I think she's maybe going to see her therapist or whatever.
Oh yes.
And and it says, there's a list of names, and we see the B's, and on the last name of the B's, it says Ben-Hur, in quotes. But there's no, and that's just because the movie had been was released the year before, right? That's all it was. It's like, that's the inside joke. It's not a great joke.
No, it's not a great joke. She was going to see her therapist, right?
She was going to see her therapist, right? Here we
And
go.
by the way,
yes.
There's a wonderful actress here tonight named Joan Bennett Steiger. Benedict Steiger. Joan Benedict Steiger.
Where's she
She played the secretary to the psychiatrist, and she was Miss Taylor's stand-in because Miss Taylor was missing for a few days off this picture, and some of the back shots are.
Joan Benedict Steiger. At one point, Steiger, because at one point you were married to Rod Steiger. Rod Steiger. At one point, she was married to Roy Scheider.
Yeah, that's right. You did it again. And the great Rod Steiger. That's fantastic. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Yeah. And so some of the back shots of Liz Taylor, it's Joan. It's Joan because that's. She was missing for a few days. I'll be away. Don't find me. No matter where I am, just let Joan do it. I won't be there. Eddie and I are together, and we're not coming back to this stinking picture. It's like the worst Liz Taylor ever, but I'm glad you're laughing.
It's got energy. It's got heat. Okay, I think we should.
I think let's show the picture. And I thank you for this, and I adore you. That's all.
Adore you.
Lovely introduction. It's almost worth getting at this hour of the morning to do. Who are you people? How'd you get in my room? As Dean Martin used to say. Well, you're the Weekend Warriors, and you came out for, of course, the right movie. How do we sum it up in one word? The word is Lubitsch. I had the great honor of talking to Billy Wilder on a couple of occasions, not extensively and not long conversations, but meaningful ones to me. And I was trying to pay him a compliment on Love in the Afternoon, and I said it was a Lubitsch film. He said, you could be Lubitsch-like, but there's only one Lubitsch. And he felt that Lubitsch was the master, and many, many people agree. This film is interesting because it's from what most people would call the last phase or stage of his career. He had the films he made in Germany, his silent films once he came to Hollywood, those glorious early talkies at Paramount, and then he moved to MGM for a couple more great films, Ninotchka, Shop Around the Corner, and then independent producers made The Brilliant, To Be or Not to Be. And then he was hired by Darryl Zanuck at 20th Century Fox. And Zanuck, who thought the world of Lubitsch, gave him pretty much carte blanche to do whatever he wanted. And so this is an original screenplay that the director himself wrote with his longtime collaborator and friend Samson Rafelson. Rafelson has a list of credits as varied and as long as any writer in Hollywood history. And from the jazz singer to to Suspicion, Hitchcock, and on and on and on. And even writers on Lubitsch films said, well, nothing without him. Even films that didn't bear his official screenplay by credit still essentially should have been credited to him. And that's not my saying so, that's the actual writers. And writers don't give up credit easily. They based it on a play. They found a Hungarian play that gave them a starting point. And I find that so interesting that he, and like his disciple Billy Wilder, always liked to have that kind of a starting point from which they could extrapolate and vary and go in different directions. Sometimes so much so that you couldn't recognize the original. But it gave them a foundation to build on. And he was not thinking of casting Don Amici in the lead. He had other actors in mind. But Mr. Zanuck asked if he would please at least do a screen test with Amici. And the story that Scott Eyman tells in his wonderful book on Ernst Lubitsch is that the director looked at the rushes of the screen test with Walter Reich, his longtime comrade, and said, Walter, what am I going to do? He's good. So he was not only obliged to cast, but he was happy to cast Don Amici in the lead. And they got on famously. And of course, it's in glorious Technicolor, but he was praised even at that time for his somewhat muted use of Technicolor. It was not garish, and as many Fox movies of the 40s were, proudly garish. It was the studio of Carmen Miranda, after all. And but here it's a more subdued palette, and everything just fits into place in this movie. It's adult, it's intelligent, it's witty, it's a film that dares to go dark at times in some of its tone and its undertone about the sort of the underside of the American success story that Amici and his family represent. So there's satire in it, very pointed social satire, and it was a hit. It was not just success d'estime, as they say, the critics fawned over. Everybody liked it, and so how could you do better? This is as good as it gets. I don't know what young film students of today or young audience of today, unaccustomed to this kind of witty and intelligent writing and performing, would make of this if they're not conditioned to it. I mean, you can acquire the means to appreciate films like this, which is why TCM is so important in our culture. But how you come to it is a question I can't answer right now. All I can say is, if you set your sights high or high enough and aspire to do something like this, you're going in the right direction. And you all showing up here early Sunday morning for this shows that you've come to the right place at the right time. Thank you so much for hearing me out, and have a good time with Heaven Can Wait.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Genevieve, for just being you and putting this phenomenal event together. We all love you and appreciate you. Just anecdotally talking to a lot of you this weekend, I knew a lot of you were very excited about what's happening right now, and I can tell by how full this room is that that's the truth. And guess what? I get it. Me too. As you all know, my two favorite things are musicals and the Oscars. Well, guess what? Here's someone who's a musical star with 2 Oscar nominations. So it ticks all my boxes. Please help me welcome one of the stars of Bye Bye Birdie, the fabulous Ann-Margret. We're so happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here.
I've seen this theater this full in quite a long time. This is an absolute thrill. So, does it feel like 60 years ago?
Not at all. Not at all.
Why?
I don't know. I still have the energy that I had then. So.
Did you know she has a rock and roll album coming out?
Oh, I had such a good time doing that.
I can't wait to hear it.
Oh my goodness. I did two, Bobby Darin, I did Splish Splash. I was taking a bath. And then Can't Take My Eyes Off of You.
Awesome.
And then, let's see. Well, 12 plus on the other side, a Christmas song. Rocking around the Christmas tree.
When do we get to hear it?
It
Yesterday. Thank you for that.
It came out yesterday. I don't have a copy of it. I don't have one copy of it, but
I'm going to find one. I have a feeling I'm going to be able to. When you think back to the time in your life when you made Bye Bye Birdie, you had already done Pocketful of Miracles. Of course, you had just done State Fair. What was your mindset going into this project where you had already had a Grammy nomination for Best New Artist, you had a hit on the Billboard charts. Were you just feeling apprehensive? Were you feeling excited? How were you feeling about everything in your career at that moment?
I was filled with excitement every single day. I had no idea what was coming up. But I was ready. Just with all this energy, and I still have it. This is so great to be in front of you guys. It's so wonderful to be in front of people who really do their homework and they know about everything we go through. And I'm real happy to be here.
I would love to hear a little bit about the connection that you obviously felt with George Sidney, the director of Bye Bye Birdie, who of course had also done Showboat. Do you recall meeting him and what the strong connection was between the two of you?
It was so strange. He had seen me before I even met him. He was at a club and I was there dancing with someone. I know who it was, but no, I knew who it was. I knew it was. And he saw me there, and that's when he thought of me being in Bye Bye Birdie. That was about 6 months before we started.
Did you ever get a chance to see it performed on Broadway?
No.
Wow.
No, I didn't.
That's so interesting. What would you say, because when you watch this film, what I love about the character of Kim McAfee as played by you, is that there's an innocence to her, but she's no pushover. You know, she's really got these two different sides to her. Was that a challenge to play, or was it particularly fun to play?
Oh, dear. Well, there's me, like right now, and then there's another side of me, where I got the music in me.
I've seen Tommy.
This is so great. I mean, you guys know so much
They do.
about movies and actors and actresses. Wow, and directors and everything.
Yeah, they really
It's
do.
so great to be in front of you guys. I love you.
If I had to pick maybe a favorite, a kind of standout moment from Bye Bye Birdie, it's probably got a lot of living to do. And I'm just mesmerized by your dancing in that sequence. And that was just curiosity. Is anyone going to see Bye Bye Birdie for the first time right now? No shame if the answer is yes.
Not many. Right. That's really not a surprise. What was that scene like for you to do with all those great dance moves? Was that a challenge to learn them all, or did you already have them in your skill set and repertoire?
Sorry. So unused to being in front of a microphone. Right. We did that number in 3 weeks, and it was Ona White, and she at the time had broken her leg, so she was sitting, like this, choreographing the whole thing, and Henson, I remember Henson, he was the one that was up showing me all this stuff. I had a great time, just a fantastic time.
We can tell when we watch.
Oh, good.
So, in the way that Kim is just a huge fan of Conrad Birdie, who was that person for you at the time? Who were you head over heels over at that time?
Of course, it was supposed to be Elvis. And I had not met him. But the next movie that I did was Viva Las Vegas. It just was so strange. And I just met him right before we started doing Viva Las Vegas. Yeah.
I would love to know what he thought of Conrad Birdie. Did he get the joke?
Well, he had such a great sense of humor. He went with the flow. He was great, just great.
I love it. There's so many priceless performances in this film. I mean, Paul Lynde.
We were laughing constantly laughing. He just was a little naughty too. Yeah, he would say things that you didn't expect to come out of his mouth. Oh my goodness. I'm laughing now.
I also, of course, love Maureen Stapleton in this film.
Oh my goodness,
Every
yes.
moment.
Oh,
So great.
yes.
What was she like?
Oh, everybody was so loving. And she had a great sense of humor too.
I love it. I'd be curious to know, I mean, the beginning 2 minutes and the ending 2 minutes of this film with you running back and forth toward the camera, all the great energy. It's such a fascinating story in that how that was kind of added after the principal photography of the shoot, they added those 2 scenes. What was going through your mind when you heard they wanted to create these fabulous bookends with you?
Wow, bless you. It was Mr. Sidney's idea, and I had tremendous respect and admiration for him. All of his ideas. My goodness, so many things have happened. I see you. I see you.
It was being very stealth. But did you feel, I know this is 60 years ago, I don't expect you to remember everything, but did you feel like more pressure on the day that you shot those 2 sequences, the beginning sequence and the end sequence, because they were so important to the film?
Well, it was 3 or 4 months after the film had finished shooting, and I had gone down to my original brunette color, which is not now. And so I had to go up again to redhead. But it was all exciting. It was all really exciting. And I knew, Mr. Sidney knew what he was doing. It had never been done before, but his mind, he always had these great ideas.
It shows. So, listen, before we watch the movie, you and I have something in common. We are both April babies. So my birthday was last week, but it's not about me. Your birthday is coming up at the end of the month. You may or may not know this, but Turner Classic Movies has a sister TV channel, which is the Food Network. So we enlisted Sherry Yard, who is one of the stars of the Great American Baking Show, and also the person who bakes all the chocolate Oscars every year at the Governor's Ball. And she was so inspired by you and your legs in this movie that we have a little something to surprise you with. So I hope you will all join me in a little song that goes like, Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, Ann-Margret, happy birthday to you. Look at those legs. Would you like to make a wish? Here, I'll take the mic.
Wish. I always make the same wish, but I never tell anybody.
Happy birthday and thank you, Ann-Margret.
Everybody, so great to see you. You know how much I love all the movies from the 80s, so I'm very excited to be here. And to paraphrase Risky Business, sometimes you just have to say, ladies and gentlemen, Rebecca De Mornay. Welcome. We're so happy you're here. Looks like you had a really good time last night on the opening night, and I'm thrilled, so welcome.
So fun seeing Andy Dickinson talk. It was amazing. She's 91.
I know it. Does it feel like this was 40 years ago? Does that blow your mind?
Wow.
You don't look like it, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, thank you. It feels like it was a while ago.
Take me back to that time. You're in your early 20s. You've done a one-line role in One from the Heart, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. You're studying at Lee Strasberg. Where's your mind at that point? Are you feeling like great things are on the way? Did this come as a surprise? Where were you at this moment?
I was really, really trying to see if I could be one of the people that actually made it in Hollywood. I came from nothing. I had grown up in Europe, and I just had this idea that I should be the leading role in a movie, which is what I told a casting director, and they were like, you gotta pay your dues first and do little roles. And I said, I think I should be, I think I want to be the leading role in a movie. And then I saw this script of Risky Business on a friend's couch, and I read it and I thought, this is my part. This is definitely my part. And I'd only done this one line in Francis Coppola's One from the Heart. And I had an agent at the time who I'd somehow gotten, don't know how, and she brought my name up. They saw me, and Paul Brickman, who wrote it and directed it, I was the last person they saw in Los Angeles. They'd seen everyone they wanted to see in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles, I think 400 young women.
Oh my God.
And I was the last person to walk in, and Paul Brickman wanted me. And I auditioned 5 times because they had to be sure the people who were financing the movie wanted somebody with a name. And it came down to this screen test that I guess is available on the 25th anniversary DVD.
It's also on YouTube.
Oh, it is?
It's fascinating.
The screen test was at 6 in the morning at the producer Steve Tish's house. Tom flew in from The Outsiders, where he was shooting, and the two of us, he walked in, we had never met, and he looked really sort of, it was very early in the morning, he'd just gotten off a plane. And I looked at him and I said, this is a chemistry test, so let's get some chemistry going fast. I swear to God. And he just looked at me.
It's so Lana.
I know. And he looked at me startled, like Joel. And we did the screen test. And after the screen test, at some point, I don't remember how many days later, I got a phone call in my apartment in West Hollywood where I was living. And it was Paul Brickman. And he said, I guess you're Lana. And it was the most exciting moment of my life. It was just at that point.
Right.
Since I've had children, that's more exciting. But at that point it was.
You know, we were talking about this before we came down here. The role of Lana is so different from the typical 80s female lead in a young interest film. How much of that do you like to think is you because of what you brought to it, and how much of it is what was in Paul Brickman's script?
I think it's 100% in Paul Brickman's mind. He conceived of the script. He played me after he cast me. I said, what's the tone of this film? And he said, listen to the song, and it was In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. I said, oh, so it's kind of moody, melancholy. He said, yes, it's like a treatise. It's a treatise on capitalism in the guise, I don't know if he said that or I just thought that actually, but that's what I think. The treatise on capitalism in the guise of a coming of age movie. But it's very bittersweet, and it's not like a, sort of in your face, like losing your virginity kind of movie. And I think it's all Paul, but it's also his choice of Tangerine Dream to score it, because the score just still kind of rocks me. And also his cinematographers, Ray Villalobos and Bruce Surtees, who gave that sort of very moody, romantic look to something that could have been sort of more straight ahead, commercial looking.
Well, it also plays with this whole kind of motif or trope of, the hooker with the heart of gold. That's not what's going on here. This character is so much more complex than what we've seen before.
Yeah, and that's what Paul wanted. And I came to realize that was my very first film, my first role. But I came to realize that that's when a movie really connects, is when the key elements of the director, the writer, the actors are all dreaming the same dream. And we were. Like, I saw the movie ahead of time the way it turned out. That usually does not happen. And we were. I saw what Paul wanted, and we did it.
So, I love any movie that has music as a big part of it, which you've just alluded to. Of course, there's also the Bob Seger moment with Tom Cruise. And in the script, that was just written as Joel dances to rock and roll music. And then it was from there that whole sequence came about. Did you hear during the filming that it had turned out the way it was, or did you experience that all-time rock and roll moment when you watched the finished product?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, I was part of that scene, even though I'm not in the scene. Paul dragged me to the rehearsal that he had with Tom in the living room set, and there was a big debate about whether it's going to be the Bob Seger song or a Rolling Stones song. And he wanted to know what we thought, and I said, I think maybe the Rolling Stones would be great. And he tried both, and Tom was a very naturally gifted dancer at that point even. And he moved more confidently and more sort of funny to the Bob Seger song. So that became the vote of all three of us.
Wow.
Yeah.
I find it very intriguing because this movie is so perfect and the direction is so great and the writing is so great that Paul Brickman only directed 2 feature films. It was this one and then Men Don't Leave with Jessica Lange, which is also just such a lovely movie from 1990. 2 wonderful films. Does that surprise you as much as it surprises me?
No, I thought Paul was, I really related to him, but he's a very hidden kind of person. He reminded me of what maybe J.D. Salinger would have been like if he was a screenwriter, which would never have happened. But he's very reclusive, he's very shy, he's very, very smart, and I'd never expected that he would not work more, but I know that everybody wanted to work with him afterwards, that he turned down movies with, Robert De Niro and Meryl Streep. I heard. He just didn't feel like it. By the way, just on a side note, I just went and saw his granddaughter, who was an alternate in the starring role of the little girl in The Secret Garden downtown. Paul Brickman's granddaughter. So yeah, her name's Sadie. She's cool.
You said it'd be okay if I asked you this question, so I'm going to ask you this question. I didn't know until researching for today that you and Tom Cruise were in a 2.5-year relationship after you made this movie. That was news to me. I'm fascinated by that.
Sometimes life imitates art.
Yeah. Was it hard to have a real life relationship with someone after living through the ultimate heightened love affair?
It was such an extraordinary time for both of us. I think both of us just really kind of, just felt a lot for each other after making that movie. And when the movie was so successful, it was just this huge hit, and we both became famous at that moment, and it was just an extraordinary time that I've never, experienced again, of just a movie being such a huge success, everyone loving the movie, and we loving each other and loving the movie, and it was really magical. It was a magical time.
You can tell. When's the last time you saw it?
I don't remember, but it comes on every so often, and when I see bits of it, I go, wow. It's one of the few films that when it comes on that I'm in, that I actually want to keep watching, because it's so perfectly made.
What other ones would you say fall into that category?
That I'm in?
Yeah, Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
Hand That Rocks the Cradle, for sure. Runaway Train, I really love that movie. The Trip to Bountiful. I love a little movie I did called Getting Out, which was a television film, but was a really great part for me. And I've just done 3 movies, sort of, in the last year. I sort of was taking time off for a while with my children. But,
tell us about them.
So I just finished a film called Holly Jolly, where I play a matriarch in this Christmas comedy. My husband is played by Chris Elliott, who is so fun. Oh my God. It's going to be so fun to see this thing. Okay. And then I did a movie about the music business and the misogyny towards women, starring Rainey Qualley, where I play a music manager, very protective of her.
Is that Andy McDowell's daughter?
Yes, it is, yes. And then prior to that, I just finished a thriller called St. Clair with Bella Thorne and Ryan Philippe, where I play this, whatever. It's really interesting.
What would you say when people realize that you're you? What do they want to talk about? Is it this? Is it Hand That Rocks the Cradle? Is it a combination of things? What do people say when they realize who
It's
you
interesting.
are?
Everyone, they sort of show who they are, but what film they want to talk about. Like when there are people, men my age, they want to talk about risky business. Then there's really, there's other kind of very sensitive, cinema buffs that want to talk about Trip to Bountiful or Runaway Train. The entire LAX TSA people love Hand That Rocks the Cradle. They just love how bad she is. So, yeah.
Well, she's bad, but you're pretty great. Rebecca De Mornay, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I hope you really enjoy the movie.
What a treat. Enjoy it, everybody. See you all soon.
Who hasn't seen Casablanca?
I'm assuming, okay, there's at least a few hands up. That's right. Don't let these people browbeat you. You have to leave if you haven't seen this movie.
I won't spoil anything. I'll just tell you that, it's his sled. Used that joke like maybe 600 times in my life. Always pays off.
I am envious of you people who raised your hands, because the fact that you're going to see Casablanca for the first time in this theater on a screen like this. First time I saw this film, and
I'm sure it was on television. I'm sure I was still in my black and white era, right, where they can't talk like normal people, and, you know. But on the flip side, anytime Nazis were involved, I was a little interested. Right? I mean, you know, there's never, you know, you just knew right away, okay, I'm interested in seeing how these guys was, right? So, but I went to college, and on my junior year in college, I learned that you could take 6 courses pass-fail at Tufts University, and I had taken none. And just like, it was, all of a sudden I realized I'm going to take some very easy classes over the next couple of years. Pass-fail. And we did not have a film department at Tufts, but we had there was something called the Experimental College, and they had this film history course, which was really sort of just, you know, connecting movies to moments in history. And I took it, and I ended up writing a paper about the Warner Brothers picture of Santa Fe Train with Errol Flynn and Ronald Reagan. And it takes a lot of different West Point graduates, famous generals, and moves them to one specific point in the pursuit of John Brown, who I think was played by Raymond Massey. And it was clear that John Brown, this sort of, violent but abolitionist, he was on the right side, but he was violent, but it was clear that he was a stand-in for Hitler. And I wrote a paper, and I just remember writing it and being into it, right? And I got it back, and in this course I was taking pass-fail, I got the only A+ of my life. I was so angry, right? But it was sort of the beginning of, oh, maybe I like these, right? Maybe this matters. And then at Tufts, the weekend, I think, after I saw Midnight Run on campus, and thought, well, this is the greatest movie that's ever been made.
The seminal film in college was Midnight Run.
I can see Midnight Run. But Midnight Run I can quote as well as I can quote Casablanca. And either the next weekend or the weekend after that, I saw Casablanca in college. And that's when that's when I got the tingles and realized something special was happening. What about you?
It was weird. I was shopping with my mother in San Francisco at a place, a long-gone department store called Akron. Okay. Somebody will always applaud it, no matter what you say. Oh yeah, I remember Akron. But I remember walking through an aisle and there was this life-size poster of Rick Blank. Right, and I remember saying to my mom, "Who's that?" And that was really one of my earliest exposures to like a movie star thing. So I mean, that's why I'm kind of, in my heart is fluttering a little bit right now, because that little kid who said, "Who's that guy?" is now introducing this movie. So, but like you, I see this movie every couple of years, and this is one of the great things about movies that makes them so timeless and important to us, is it's been said, you don't get it the first time you see it. When you're young and you see Casablanca, you don't get it. You haven't lived enough to understand the dynamics between these characters or the incredible history behind this film, both the geopolitical history of the time and the history of making this film. So I will just say that to me, this movie is so incredible because it represents what Hollywood did best.
That's right.
This is absolutely what Hollywood did best. They did not, I also think a lot of times I really admire people who set out to make a great movie. Like that is their goal. We're going to make a great movie, you know. That wasn't the case with Casablanca, right? They just were making a movie that seemed timely and maybe this will work. You know, but then the artistry kicks in,
and it's just it is. And I'm just curious because you know in the production mostly so many noirs. How many accidents come together so nicely? This will sound well. It's the TCM Film Festival, so this is where you drop names. But Tom Hanks, I was talking to on Wednesday, and he has a new book, a novel that's about the making of a movie, and in it are just these series of accidents that work, the series of accidents that cause problems, how you solve the problems, and how that comes together in some magical way, sometimes, to make something great. And it is exactly what happened here. Starting with this guy named Stephen Carnot, K-A-R-N-O-T. I've told his story a couple times on the air. Stephen Carnot worked for Hal Wallace at Warner Brothers. He was a script reader, and he had an office. And on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. December 8th, the United States declared war on Japan. Many places shut down. Stephen Carnott probably could have taken the day off, but he went to work. And I don't know when the script, this unproduced play, Everybody Comes to Rick's, by Joan Allison and Murray Burnett, I don't know when that had worked its way into Warner Brothers, but it showed up on his desk on December 8th, 1941. Now suppose it shows up on December 1st, 1941, a week earlier. Or November 1st. Maybe if it's December 1st, you'd remember it a week later. But if it had been a month earlier, you know, maybe it never gets made. It's entirely possible. But of course, he reads it then, and it clicks. And hang on, this is what he wrote. Talk amongst yourselves. He sends it to Hal Wallace with this note. Excellent melodrama, colorful, timely background, tense moods, suspense, psychological and physical conflict, tight plotting, and this is the best part, sophisticated hokum. A box office natural for Bogart or Cagney or Raft in out of the usual roles, and perhaps Mary Astor. And that gets to Wallace, and he instantly likes it. About 2 weeks later or so, he's like, oh, we're making it. And he starts pre-production. They hadn't even paid for it yet. And it turned out $20,000, which was at the time by far the most ever paid for an unproduced play.
Unfortunately, they brought the Epstein brothers in to work on the screenplay, and they turned it into just the most magnificent screenplay. And it's so brilliantly cast from top to bottom. Significantly, I think, with a lot of expatriate Europeans who had fled the Nazis, that gave this film its incredible, the gravity that comes with every player in this movie. And I think Monica is in the house, right?
Oh, Monica Henry in the house? And understandably so, because as it was written, this was the second romantic lead, and it's not what he needed or wanted at that time. And Wallace, to his credit, how Wallace kept plugging away, and when Paul said, make the part better, and give me Billy with the other two, and I'll do it. And how Wallace recognized the value of having Paul Henry, then he did it. And that's what left us with this more substantive character than was originally written.
And of course, this is the handiwork of the man who I think is arguably the greatest studio director in Hollywood history, Michael Curtiz. All the pieces together on this film from top to bottom. Well, I was joking earlier with somebody. I said, Ben and I have conspired at TCM on occasion to say, when we do our intros, we gotta be careful because we show so many films. We can't say that everything is great or that everything is legendary. That's a particular one that sticks in my craw. When they start telling me that people who have made movies for 10 years are legendary, don't believe them. You gotta last a long time to become legendary, or that it's a masterpiece.
Right, that's right. It should be good.
Yeah, we have declared a moratorium on those three words, except for this moment right now. Because this film is all three of those things.
So before we're going over, I just realized we can do this for 30, 40 minutes, but You were in a movie in 1958. I think it was featured there slightly, High School Confidential.
Yep.
Where I would like to point out, you said this line. You were undercover. I don't want to spoil it, but Russ pretends to be a high school student, but really is an undercover cop. He looks like he's 14. But you have the line, I'm looking to graze on some grass.
And I found it.
So John Drew Barrymore was in that movie, and he told you a story about his dad at this hotel.
Yeah, about his dad, John Barrymore, and he said that he was in the hotel there. That's what made me think about it. And he was at the bar and he got drunk. He got really drunk and they had to kick him out. And he was belligerent and they finally threw him out and he fell down on the sidewalk out in front of the hotel. And he looked up and saw that his star was there. That was a great story.
That feels like a very classic John Barrymore story. Now, you caught a little glimpse there in that first thing of a film you made called The Fastest Gun Alive, where you're walking on the shovels. It's you do about a 3.5-minute number in the middle of that picture. And 6 years ago, it went viral on the internet, right? As people discovered it. And it caused millions and millions of people suddenly watching this 3-minute clip from a moderately obscure mid-1950s film. And the reaction to it among a number of celebrities was through the roof. Stephen Weber was on Wings, a great, terrific actor. Russ Tamblyn, amazing. Sarah Silverman, oh my God, watch it all. Really funny comedian Paul F. Tompkins, this is insane, right? All in caps. And then finally the capper from an actress named Amber Tamblyn. My dad is a badass. Must be nice. I sense from a lot of stars of your generation whose kids might not be in the business, or even some who are, that they don't always have a full appreciation for their parents. But you and Amber, you guys share that. She likes to watch you work.
I do too.
But nice. You have a nice appreciation for each other's gifts. Yeah.
That dance on shovels, by the way, they tried to get it cut out of the movie. Glenn Ford tried to get it cut out, and an executive at MGM told me that he came up just ravished and said, "Listen, I'm making a nice, simple little Western here." And that's all I did in it was that dance. And it was sort of like in all Westerns, there's usually a section in there that's away from all the action where chorus girls were dancing or something on the stage. And so they said, they asked me to do a dance number, and I did that number. And then, but Glenn said, and suddenly, in the middle of my simple little black and white Western, this guy comes and he's dancing all over the barn and flying everywhere. And so they did cut it out for the first preview. But what they couldn't cut out of the preview was that in the credits at the end of the movie, it said Russ Tamblyn's dance number choreographed by Alex Romero. So luckily, when people filled out their cards after seeing the movie, they said, "Where was his dance?" Because it said, "Danced by him, by Alex Romero." And so that was a good one for me anyway to put it back in.
I mean, and there's no trickery. There's a couple edits in it, but there's no. I mean, like there's a seesaw. There's a couple of little bits on the seesaw where you jump and a girl flies through the air and you catch it. It's amazing. And then another one where somebody jumps down from up top from like a railing onto the thing and you go up onto the railing.
I know. I even now look at it and wonder, how the hell did I do that? Yeah, I did another trick in Seven Brides where I got kicked out and I grabbed a rope and climbed up it, and it was on the side of the board, and I was able to flip over the top to get to the top. And I still don't know how I did that. When you're performing, you get an extra strength.
It has caused millions of people, including serious fans of these movies, to think of you as a dancer. And obviously you do dance, but that you're a gymnast. really a tumbler.
That's really what I was a gymnast and a street dancer. I just loved to dance, but I didn't take lessons or anything. And I wasn't supposed to dance even in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. Michael Kidd wanted all the brothers to be, except for Howard Kidd, but he wanted the rest of the brothers all to be great dancers, like Jacques D'Amboise and the New York City Ballet and Mark Platt. And so anyway, I wasn't even supposed to dance in it, and the studio said, look, you can have four great dancers, and then 2 actors and then we're leaving Howard out of this. And then 2 actors that are under contract here, that'll just be acting parts. And I was one of those actors, but I happened to go on the set when they were rehearsing, and I went with Jeff Richards, and we went over to meet them all and see them all. And Michael Kidd asked me, he said, I understand you can do you're an acrobat, you can do flips. And I said, yeah, and I right on the spot did a backflip. And he said, oh my God, we're going to put that in a number. And I said, no, I don't want to dance with Jacques D'Amboise or ballet. But so I finally did it and told people, I guess that was on the screen too, that I told people that I was not a dancer and never had lessons. But I did have on-the-job training with all these great choreographers.
Right, Herbie's paying.
All your movies, and I've seen you jump all over things and do acrobatics. But he said, in West Side Story, Riff is straight dancing. There'll be no acrobatics at all. And I said, okay, I'll do my best. And it wasn't until we went to New York and spent too long in New York. So we got back to the studio, and they said, well, we're closing down for another couple of weeks, and we didn't know what was going on. And Phil Gersh, my agent, said, yeah, they're trying to figure out what to do now that Jerry is taking too much time directing. And he did. He made he shot stuff that took forever to...
Well, tell that. So there's one story. The sort of a big number in New York toward the end of your time there in New York at what is now Lincoln Center. And then you guys do it. Robert Wise thinks it's great. You guys nail it. A big number. And then, but Jerry wants to have everybody do it
the other foot.
On the other foot.
If you're a dancer, you don't know how hard that is, to do like a tertiate and do all these dance steps down the street. I could barely do the ones in one way, But we went all the way down the street, and all the dancers were going crazy. So it took forever to learn how to do it right, on the other foot. And
it was no point. Nobody rehearsed this, right? It was just
this just happened when we were in New York, and it was it took a lot of time, and he took a lot of time. But who's going to argue with him? He was a great. He was a great choreographer and did some good things.
But you and Rita have said that he was tough. George Chakiris is a little. He's more gentle in his memories. But you and Rita feel like you're being honest, that he was really tough to work for.
Oh, he was really tough. I had a big argument with him. Oddly enough, the first time I had a line where we did all the.
You have the first line of the movie.
Yeah, I think it was.
It is. You have the first snap.
And it wasn't.
And the first line.
It wasn't even a line.
Right. So
it was just a grunt.
Right.
So I run up I come face to face with George Chakiris, who was Bernardo, and my line is like that, And so I did it, and then Jerry came in and said, "No, Russ," he said, "it's like the end of in the music. You got to understand that the music goes da 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 ha." And that's the way it was done on the stage. And I said, Jerry, I understand how it was done on the stage, but this isn't the stage. This is a camera right in my face, and they're shooting. And I said, I'm not going to look in the camera and go, ha! This just was silly. And so we argued about it. We walked down the block arguing about it. and he was saying it was the way part of the music, and finally Bob Wise came and said, hey, listen, you know, we got to get working here. The time's going by. He said, listen, why don't we shoot it both ways? We'll shoot it both ways and then figure out which one's the best. So I did it both ways, and they ended up using Muller.